The first time I ever searched for anyone was Virgil. Was actually Virgil. I was 10 years old, and my mother, I don't know for what reason, that was her little brother. We had to come to Denny, New Mexico to look for him, and then we were in Las Cruces, and I remember being like I said, 10 years old, going into these storefronts with my mom because his girlfriend worked in one place, and then they said no, she got fired, she works somewhere else. So we went to another place looking, and then we ended up in hotels, knocking on hotel doors. That was the first search. The second time I ever searched for anybody was Virgil. Virgil had moved to California at this point, and one night, while in a drunken stupor, drove himself off of a cliff in Bakersfield. And when we arrived, my family and I arrived the next morning with his brothers and sisters, it was a cliffside, and all I remember seeing were fragments of pieces of his truck scattered everywhere. Paper and one shoe over here, tools scattered here, and at the very bottom we didn't see a truck, so we thought it maybe fell into the ravine, and so we started to kind of go down on our butts down this cliffside looking for him, seeing little flecks of blood here and there, and we ended up actually finding out that he somehow, after flying off this cliff and tumbling into the bottom, crashing, he climbed himself out of the cliff and climbed himself all the way up. Climbed himself onto the sidewalk, and a car full of young men in a convertible saw him, pulled over, picked him up and took him to their dad and helped doctor him up, and that's where he was. And they were trying to take him to the hospital. He said, hell no. And so we got a phone call the next day, and he was bandaged up. But he survived. We probably all have maybe a relative or two like that in our families who we call El Gato, the one who has 9 lives. And that was Virgil. And I think about Juan Felipe's quote whenever I think about the beginnings. His quote of needing to say something, and of course at that time, like I mentioned here, I knew that something needed to be said. I didn't know how to access that. I just knew that words, text, language would be a part of that. I find it kind of funny that whenever I'm invited to do a reading or during the Q&A afterwards, someone will get up always from the audience and ask a question and be surprised when they learn that I don't have the answer for it. Because I think it's a popular assumption that in order to write a book, you must have all the answers. And then I find, they find it surprising when I go on to say that I believe that writing creatively is less about answers and more about discovery. Terry Tempest Williams wrote, I write to discover, I write to uncover, I write to meet my ghosts. And of course, Gloria Ansaldúa similarly wrote, I write to become more intimate with myself and with you. I write to discover myself, to preserve myself, to make myself. So I believe that it starts with a kernel inside of us all, something that piques our subconscious or was planted in us long ago via experience or conditioning or trauma or a diverse range of reasons. And this kernel, this innate curiosity, it often reemerges in the form of a question or questions later in our life. Question that had been buried deep inside of us. And oftentimes it's a question that we didn't even know existed. If we know the answers and we write with a sense of knowing, the writing tends to fall flat. If we aren't seeking, then the reader is not seeking. If we are seeking, then the reader will also seek. Which is to say, the reader will continue to turn the page. Writing is our way of journeying down the path together with the reader, or a community of readers. This is why good poems and good books feel like they're in dialogue and conversation with us personally, because they truly are. So then, because we're writing from this state of mystery, or unknowing, we don't really know what the end result will be. We only know the subject, which is in fact the door that invites us into the discovery. So the subject that we're writing about is only the door. 9 times out of 10, the discovery itself, rather the purpose of the poem, the purpose of the novel or memoir we spend so much time writing, is rarely about what we initially thought it was. And by the end, if we're lucky, we sometimes get closer to what that purpose was all along. Oftentimes, sometimes, in my case especially, it leads to more questions than answers. And I want to actually read a poem by James Wright. which I think demonstrates that wonderfully. This idea of discovery. One of my favorite poems by James Wright, lying in a hammock at William Duffy's farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. Over my head, I see the bronze butterfly, asleep on the black trunk, blowing like a leaf in the green shadow. Down the ravine behind the empty house, the cowbells follow one another into the distances of the afternoon. To my right, in a field of sunlight between two pines, the droppings of last year's horses blaze up into golden stones. I lean back as the evening darkens and comes on. A chicken hawk floats over, looking for home. I have wasted my life. Damn. James Wright, I have wasted my life. Now, I've never been in conversation with James Wright, so I'm guessing here. But looking at the title, Lying in a Hammock at William Duffy's farm in Pine Island, Minnesota, leads me to believe that while lying in this hammock, he's basically creating a list of what he observes around him. How the hell he would know that his very last line would be, I have wasted my life, I doubt. He was following his own sort of raw impulse of cataloging, of listing. Asleep on the black trunk, blowing like a leaf, down the ravine, the cowbells, the sunlight, two pines, last year's horses, blazing up. Jesus Christ, I wasted my life. Which is an awesome line because there's still mystery in that. It's so ambiguous. What does he mean, I have wasted my life? Does he mean I should have been lying in this hammock all along and I was out doing other shit and I wasted my life? Does he mean all of these things are so beautiful and I'm just sitting here wasting my life? We don't know really what he means. We can suggest, we can, infer what he means, but we don't really know. And he leaves it ambiguous like that because he probably doesn't know either. There is this idea still of continuing the mystery, the discovery. I've wasted my life. Yeah. So then, the question is, how do we make space for this discovery? Well, if we don't know what we don't know, then how do we know what form or genre the idea should take? This is the question. One way is to assign, in an inorganic way, a genre or a form to the subject, and start there. I want to write a poem today about a garden. But my hesitation in doing it this way is that the moment we assign a form to this unknown idea, we instantly begin to put constraints around the possibilities of discovery. It's like putting walls around a territory we don't even know if walls are necessary, or if walls would even be adequate. If we truly don't know what we don't know, if we don't know what to end this poem, if we don't know to what end this poem or story will take, why not write it all? All of it. The total experience. Not only point our pen at the subject itself like some dart or arrow aiming for precision, but rather, why not cast our nets wide, allowing space also for the meta-information, the detritus, the imagination, the found language, the eavesdropping, the street signs, and the sixth sense, intuition. Why not utilize all forms of language, text at our disposal as we aim toward this unknown discovery? What happens if we allow the subject to stand alone, without loyalty to any form or genre? America. Why are your back roads stricken with altars, and your plastic carnations entombed among deflated balloons? What keeps the tattered photographs from disintegrating with the dew? Who dies in the back of a farm worker's van, limbs splayed to the heavens? Who survives? Who arrives first? Who will harvest those bodies? And who recalls them in a dream? How does one return the belongings? When names fade, where do they go? What country will claim the purgatory? What is the geography of hell? And who inherits this wreckage? And how deep is the ravine of a child's memory? And are there two sides to the golondrina's account? And what business has the worm entering the persimmon? What galaxies in the mollusk? Whose bell in the pelvis? And do crucifixes exclude? And what irrigations of blood? And does a fig weep in the open air? Does water discriminate? And what about sirens? And how do we count the invisible? Can angels scale border walls? Who will open the gates for them? Who denies them? What manner of love is this?